One method that probably wins more money and more matches on winter commercials, especially when it comes to catching quality silverfish, is the short pole. And on very cold days, it's often later in the day, them last couple of hours of a session, that it comes good with big fish. And on milder days, you can actually catch there for the majority of a session. So for today's video, we're going to have a look at where to actually fish the short pole line and why, how to feed it, what rigs to use, and how to get the best from this deadly swim. First thing, where do you actually fish the short pole line? Now, where a lot of people go wrong is they pick a distance rather than actually looking for a feature on the bottom. And the feature that I'm looking for this time of year is the bottom of that near shelf. And more importantly, where the hard, firm shelf goes onto the soft, silty bed of the lake. Because what that means, if I can find that little spot, is the fish are coming out of the main depth and just onto that first bit of hard bottom to feed. And the reason for fishing on the firmer, tough gravel style bottom of the shelf is that you don't foul hook as many. I'm going to be feeding ground bait there to get them in, and if you're fishing in too much silt, you can't feed any volume of ground bait without them getting their heads buried into the bottom. So in terms of plumbing up, if I go out to sort of 5.5 to 6 meters in length and drop my plummet in, I'm in the main body of the lake, and when I reach out, it's not getting any deeper, it's nice and flat. So I'm on that main flat bit of the lake, but when I actually donk my 20 gram plummet down there and then slowly lift up, I can feel that it's getting stuck in the silty bottom. So I'm sort of lifting it 2 foot off. You can see there with my elastic, it's getting wedged into the silt on the bottom. I'll just drop it. So hopefully you'll be able to see a cut of getting wedged into that silt on the bottom there. And it's still very, very soft in that area. Again, your elastic will sort of come out and then slowly unplug your plummet. But if I come back just onto my number 4 section just here and do the same, when I actually drop it in, as I lift up, it just comes cleanly off the bottom. So that little area that I found there is where the soft bottom meets the harder, firm shelf. And as I start to come in even closer, the depth is coming up. So that, for me, is the perfect place to fish. I'm at the bottom of that closed shelf, perfect gathering spot for any food for fish, but still onto the hard bottom, but in the main body of the lake as well. And one other thing that I'd mention when it comes to where to fish and why is I always try and fish me closer line slightly to the right hand side, and the reason for that is I'll be fishing other methods during a day often, maybe pellets on a long pole, maybe even a feeder, and when I net fish I naturally bring the pole round to the left because I'm right-handed, and most of my splashing is done just in front of me as I'm netting the fish here. So by positioning the line slightly to the right, I can just keep them fish a little bit more settled away from the disturbance. So that's where to fish and why to fish in that particular area. Feeding, the most important part of any kind of fishing, and the actual thing that I'm going to feed today is ground bait. I feel like that's mega important on the close line because you're trying to set a bed and gather an amount of fish there. If you're going to catch some bigger fish and you're going to catch an amount of fish, whether it's fishing it all day or towards the end of the match, I want to be positive there. So I'm going to feed ground bait and quite a bit of bait in it as well. So my mix is F1 dark and 100% pure ground expander, just 50-50. The F1 dark's got a lovely sweet smell and a nice dull colour, while the actual expander ground bait is full of crushed pellets that them bigger silverfish on commercials like. They get fished for places like Hallcroft, where we are today, with pellets all the time. So skimmers, roach, hybrids, bream, they're used to eating pellets. So the crushed expander, the 100% pure ground expander, is a real important part of the mix. I feel like the bigger fish are used to eating it and come and settle on it. And the reason that I want to show you the ground bait before I put it in is you can see I've mixed it nice and damp, and that is a vital part of this approach for me, because I'm looking to gather a lot of fish and catch them quickly and catch big ones. I want to keep them settled on the bottom, and by mixing the ground bait damp, it means all that crushed pellet, fish meal, and all the ingredients in that ground bait soak everything up and it lies nice and dormant on the bottom. And when I come to feed it in a minute, you'll see exactly why that is important. In terms of what bait I'm going to put in it, I'm going to go for a nice combination of particles. I'm going to put a big handful of casters in there. I'm going to put a big handful of Fishery micro pellets in there. I've actually put a bit of super sweet liquid on them as well, and I've also added a little bit to the ground bait. Love that stuff for commercial silvers. And I'm going to put a nice nugget of chopped worm and just a little sprinkling of maggots, because I might try them as a hook bait. And now when I mix all this in, it will go even damper. So I'll have a really damp ground bait full of nice attractive particles. And it might look like there's a lot of bait in there, but as I've mentioned, this is a winning line and I want to be positive. I want to win some fish, and the main way to do that is to be aggressive with bait. And as you can see there, it's got a lovely mix of micros, few chopped worms, casters and an odd maggot too. And when it comes to actually feeding this, I'm going to sandcastle it into the lake, and that is why I want the ground bait very, very damp. It allows me just to fill my pot up like so and just press it down so it doesn't fall out on the way. And when I get out there, I'm going to turn that pot over and it's going to create a nice big area. Again, it's all about gathering fish, and you can't catch a massive weight on a very small area, which is why I'm sandcastling it in, so it creates a nice big area. And I'm also going to feed it a little bit back from where I've plumbed up, and the reason for that is I know that the slope is going that way, and when fish start coming in and eating this, they'll waft it downwards. So I'm going to feed it a tiny little bit further back than where I plumbed up, and I'm just going to rest that pot on the water, give it a little tap, and you can see it sort of billow out of the pot. It'll all go down in a nice clump because the ground bait's very, very damp, but as it gets to the bottom, it'll open up and you'll have a nice spread down on the bottom. I'm going to put 3 300ml pots of that mix in to kick off, and generally that's the amount I'd feed to begin with on the line, but I'll still have plenty of mix for topping up if we want to. So I'm going to put another 2 of them in, and then that will be the peg set for the day. If you mix your ground bait too dry, I know I'm sort of stressing the importance of it being damp. If you do mix it too dry and try and feed it in this sandcastle manner, it'll literally spread out on the surface and not get to the bottom. And you'll have loads of little particles floating up. You'll have a nightmare with foul looking fish, whereas as you can see there, when I open it up and pot it in, that clump all goes down, and that is a nice initial bed to kick off the short line. While that settles, the rig for the close in line doesn't get much simpler, but a few very important parts to it. The elastic is a number 5 Preston slip, very versatile. I could be catching anything from chunky little roach here through to big bream hybrids, and a number 5 slip through a full top kit will cope with just about anything. I've got a number 8 microcube back shot and quite a short line, about 10 inches between the float and the pole tip, and that's important because I want to be fishing very accurately underneath my pole tip. If I want to fish a bit past my bait, I can. If I want to come right in on it, I can. And I also think you miss a lot less bites by having a short line between float and pole tip. Float itself, we've got about 5.5 feet of water where we're fishing today. Is a 0.35 of a gram slim maggot. Beautiful float for fishing sort of on the drop, a nice slow fall in the winter. It's got a visible cane tip that I can see like a beacon, and you can also shot it nicely. I love a cane tip when you're fishing things like casters, and a carbon stem just to follow the strung out shots down. Mainline's 013 N-gauge, bit of durability but not too heavy in the winter, and then shotting doesn't get any more simple. It's a bit of a traditional shirt button style. I've got a couple of 13 microcubes which just help me dot that bristle down, and then I've got 7 number 10 micro shots spaced sort of the bottom third of the rig, let's say. I haven't actually measured it. I've just strung them out in the bottom third, and I do that whatever depth it is. So if it's deeper water, they'd be strung out over a little bit bigger area, just so it's nice and proportional. And the reason for having a strung out shotting pattern on this swim is I feel like them quality fish, the bigger, wiser ones, are always watching for bait falling in. And if you can make that last little bit fall slowly, there's more chance of them bigger fish seeing it and they'll head over and pick it up. You have a little watch today. A lot of them bites will come just as your float's trimming up. They've followed it down and you'll get a nice dink and there's one on. And the hook length is a 010 pure fluorocarbon, 6 inches long, and an 18 F1 maggot hook, which will cope with just about any winter commercial silverfish. Very, very simple, but a few key things that you've got to get right with it. If this was a match situation or another fishing day, if you just pleasure fishing, one thing I'd say is the colder it is, the later in the day you're likely to catch on the close line. At the minute it's very mild, so I think we'll go in and get plenty of bites there. And on a mild day, it can be a case of fishing short all day. But my advice would be the colder it is, more time spent fishing maybe a long pole or a feeder to start with, and then come on to this sort of halfway through or the second part of the session. But for the sake of today's video, we really want to make the most of it. We're lucky that it's been a mild week, and I've got a feeling we'll get a few bites most of the day here. Now, presentation wise, I like to flick the rig in and lay it out flat on the water, just so you get that nice slow fall with them strung out shots. And as you can see, when that float settles, that carbon stem just kicks around and you can see that strung out shotting pattern working lovely. And I just sort of hold that number 8 microcube just touching the water so that float's nice and tight to it. If I get a bite, it should be a lovely little dink. I've got my float dotted to a pimple. And as the session goes on, we can work at keeping this swim going, feeding it, building it up. And hopefully we'll have a good day on it. Might have to just nip one of my number 13 trimmers off, because even for my eyes that's dotted a little bit too much maybe. I'm going to just nip one off. That's the beauty of having them little trimmer shot up there, is you want to just adjust your bristle, you can just bite one off and you're back in. It'll just hopefully pop up another mil or two. And then in terms of actually feeding, that were a big carp. In terms of actually feeding this line, because I've only just fed it a few minutes ago, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. But I'm thinking a combination of loose feeding casters, I had a little indication then straight away, combination of loose feeding casters by hand to keep bringing new fish in, and maybe topping it up with ground bait a little bit later. They're going to be the likely couple of ways that I'll do it. Tend to feed loose fed casters a little bit more if species like roach are present and you're trying to keep bait falling through to attract them in and keep them there. But when it's less fish and they're bigger, sometimes reining back on the loose feed, not as often and not as much, and feeding ground bait again, just to keep that trap set and keep a bit of fresh ground bait on the bottom, works well. So it's a case of adjusting how you feed to the venue or the particular day and just adapting as the session goes on. But no proper bites so far, which is interesting. I reckon you'll just cut in at the first fish, John, then. There we go. What we got? Chunky little roach to kick off. Not a big one, but a start, and already I'm thinking if they're present, I might start loose feeding a bit of bait to keep them there, get them competing. Gonna lay that rig in. I'm just going to start throwing sort of 15 or 20 casters just short of my float and just onto it. With fish like this, little roach, they'll eat a lot of your bait very, very quickly, which is why it's important to keep some going in and keep it topped up. The last thing you want if you're trying to catch a lot of bigger fish, especially later in the day, is them little rascals in on the bait and eating absolutely everything present. So as soon as I start catching them little roach, I'm going to start feeding these casters, and the more there is, or the more I can get away with feeding, the more aggressive I will actually be. Always try and feed just back from the float a little bit, again, just like that ground bait, because any bait will get washed down the slope with them feeding fish. So I'm kind of fishing on the back edge of it all the time. Just got a single maggot on to start off with. See that carp? These are lovely chunky little fish, and I mean if you caught them all day in a silverfish match you'd end up with a brilliant weight. Typical bait eaters, let's say. They will be absolutely loving them loose fed casters. The beauty of catching them close in, of course, is you can catch them nice and quickly, and it wouldn't take long to ramp up a big weight of them fishing the short pole. And on a day like today, where I'm going to be fishing this swim all the time, I'd be more than happy catching them to start off with, keep this bait going in. I'm going to up it already to 2 lots of sort of 15 casters. But if you can start catching these fish and build up the bait, hopefully things will just get bigger, bigger and stronger, and we'll have a good run of bigger fish later on. I reckon that is a Hallcroft perch, you know. Look at him. Now there's loads of these in commercials and they love hanging about at the bottom of that near side slope. It's typical weight builder that you'd catch. And here at Hallcroft, this time of year in particular, sort of early in the commercial silverfish season, you can catch 20 or 30 pound of them. And they're right chunky little fat bellied things. Ooh. Great weight builders. Typical fish that you do catch on this close line, and like the roach, they love loose fed casters. There's actually some real big uns of them in here, up to like £2. It'd be lovely to catch one of them for you. Already you'll probably be able to tell now we've started getting back. So many of them come just as that, there you go, missed that one. That wasn't a very good example, Matt, but just as that rig's settling, and that's because the fish are watching bait fall. You can see quite a lot of the algae's died now. Water's getting clearer for the winter. Caught a little leaf then, pulling any trees up. You'll notice as well that that short line that I mentioned was important when we did a little look at the rig. When I get that little dinky bite, it just sort of dinks under where they suck their maggot in. You don't have to strike really, really hard. You can just lift it up, and if you do miss the bite, you can just drop it back in. So you're not lifting the whole rig out and flicking it back in again. Sort of direct onto the fish. I don't know what this is. I'm really hoping, because I mentioned that we might catch a bigger perch, that it's a big stripy one. Certainly come to them regularly loose fed casters. I'd love to catch a big perch. And they do hang about on this closer line. Could also be, oh, it's a massive perch, look at that. Now they are proper caster munching short line fish. Look at him. Said that we might get one of them, didn't I? Look at the size of mouth on him, that little tiny 18 F1 maggot. Actually caught him on 2 maggots. I just thought, in amongst them roach, I'll slip 2 on, see if we can get a bit bigger one. And we've got him, look at that. When you're actually loose feeding bait on top of the ground bait, like I am here, it's important to get a bit of a picture in your mind of when that bait's getting towards the bottom. And I'm sure a lot of people think that baits like maggots and casters fall quicker than they actually do. I know that because we've done quite a bit of underwater filming the last few years, and we've actually got one coming out soon that talks about the fall rate of maggots and casters. But in sort of 6 foot of water, it'll take maggots anything from 40 to 50 seconds to actually get to the bottom, and casters not much shorter than that as well. So like, I've just thrown that bait in there now, and I know that's nowhere near the bottom yet. But when it sort of gets down there, maybe another 20 seconds time or so, that's when you can really expect a bite, because fish have followed it down. And one little thing I do like to do is, when I expect them maggots or casters to be getting down there, I'll just pick the rig up a foot out of the water, like so, and drop it back in, just so mine's settling in and amongst them. And often you get a bite off a bit of a bigger, more wary fish when you do that. I think that's why loose feeding is so effective, especially with maggots and casters, because they fall so slow, so there's a lot of attraction and time for fish to see them as they fall. That bait that I threw in this chuck will probably be on the bottom now. See if we can get a bite off it. Obviously the ground bait sets the bed, and the loose feed is the attraction. That's pulling fish down as it slowly falls, and they'll come into the loose feed, follow it down, and hopefully hang about for a while on top of the bed of bait that's on the bottom. Ooh, missed it. That was my chance. That looked like a proper fish bite as well. It's shot under. See if it'll give us another chance. Not going to feed this time. Little fish has had that on the way down, unfortunately. Chewed me maggot to death. See what I am going to do? I'm just going to tweak my rig a little bit as well, just to try and pinpoint an odd better one. I'm going to bulk up the shot, so I've got a little bulk of 5 number 10s now. And a couple of droppers, just so it gets down past them little roach a little bit quicker, hopefully. Caught enough of them now. I want to catch a few bigger ones. Another little skimmer, I think, that one. Definitely moved in now. You can see how, when you're catching chunky fish like this, that close in, you can soon amass a weight. Bigger hook bait, bulk down the rig a little bit. We've had to tweak a few things today, which has been quite interesting. Obviously with so many fish there, it's just been about doing a few things to get your bait down a bit quicker to catch some better ones. And I'm going to start now just introducing a little bit more ground bait. I'm going to put a few fresh worms in, just because the ones I put in my mix at the start have probably broken down a little bit in the ground bait. So I'm just going to mix a few little fresh chopped worms in there. I'm just going to put in like a nice one-handed ball, and when them skimmers arrive and them better fish arrive, sometimes just replenishing the ground bait and putting in a little bit more will really focus them. If you think it's a couple of hours since I fed that initial bait, we've had all them fish in on it, they've probably spread it around a bit, and if I can just drop an odd nugget in to refocus them, and of course that sweet smell of the F1 and that super sweet, it just focuses them in a little bit more. Let's see if it works and we can catch a few more now. Still going to keep loose feeding. I feel like that's so important to have that bait falling through. Ground bait's the holder on the bottom and the loose feed's the attractor bringing them in. There we go, little nugget of ground bait. Better fish straight away. I keep mentioning time of day, but these fish, they love coming closer in to eat late on. Naturally do it in commercials. I'm just feeding that little bit of fresh ground bait a little bit later when you start to catch them. Can be very, very important. It's just about timing and getting it right. If you do it too early, when they're not there, you risk, you know, overfeeding the swim too quickly. But if you can just sneak an odd little nugget in just as you start to catch, maybe if it's mild like today, a few fresh worms in it, chopped nice and finely, you can just get that timing right of when you start to refeed it. Keep that loose feed going in as well to bring the fish in. It's a lovely way of feeding and attacking this close line, and for the rest of the day now I'll just work at building it up, and I'm hoping it'll just get better and better. Still an odd roach to catch in between, but if it stays like this I'm going to end up with a lovely net of fish and a really good weight. Whether you're pleasuring or in a match, you're going to have had a great day. There's so many commercials full of silvers up and down the country where what you've seen us doing here, you can apply it to them and have a great day's fishing. So now that they're there, the skimmers have arrived, another little nugget of ground bait, and I'm just giving it like a one-handed nip. So I've got it loose in my hand like that, and I just give it a one nip with my hand, so it's not a rock hard ball, because what I want is I want that to go to the bottom and break up straight away. But it's important you do give it a nip, because whereas this morning I was trying to create a big area, hence why I fed it loose, now I'm trying to refocus the fish in the spot where I'm going to put my hook bait. So the feeding I'm doing with the ground bait now is very different to what I was this morning, but that's the beauty of that particular mix, the F1 dark and the pure ground expander. You can do literally anything with it, and especially when you mix it nice and damp, which I've really hammered home in this film, the importance of it, it just makes it super versatile. Like now I'm going to go back out and just drop this right on top of that ball, and then I'm going to keep my big area and my attraction going with the loose feed as well. It's starting to get real good now. There we go, right on top of the ball of ground bait again, and they are really lined up now. amazing how your peg changes with this. Start off with them smaller fish, get a bit of bait going in, then kick it back into action with a little bit more ground bait later, and you literally can read your peg changing. Get it right and you can catch all day and catch all sizes and species of fish too. Such an interesting line to fish on commercials. Sometimes wonder and wish I fished it for a whole match. Look at that, got a tangle now because I'm too busy talking. Yeah, I sometimes wonder if you just sat and fished it all day, even in winter, what would you actually catch? Look at that, really lined up now. And this is the sort of finish that you're looking for on this swim. They're the real big boys, look at them. Sometimes, you know, especially when it's freezing cold, them better ones can feed literally the last 30 minutes or so of a match, and you know what it's like, you only need 5 or 6 of them in that last half an hour, and it's another £10 on your weight, which in a commercial silverfish match is massive. And that can't, of course you can catch them on other methods, but if there were one area of the peg that I would bet money on you're going to catch them fish in the winter, it is that close in line in them closing stages of the day. And even today it seemed a little bit like that. Look at that, they're literally, whee! You get that, John? Jumping skimmers, woohoo! I think it's a marlin. Love it when they turn up on this. Absolutely love it. Probably 14 ounce. When you're catching this quick, you can ramp up a massive weight in not a long time at all. Definitely seems like double maggots better today as well. And definitely seems like that little bit more of a bulk down rig. I know that we didn't start on it, but I honestly didn't expect there to be that many small fish to begin with, the little roach. And it just shows you've got to be open-minded and be willing to change, even if you think you know what's right. They have settled beautifully now. Love it when they jump out. I'd love to see some underwater footage of what happens. Oh, look at that. What a chuck. Perch. This is another perch. Must be a few of them in there. Stunning colours on them in winter this time of year. I mean, look at that, holding his fin up for us. Where is he? I reckon if I come back as a fish, you know, when I died, I'd come back as a massive perch. Love them. Not a smelly bream. Now if we catch another perch, or it's not a skimmer or bream, that is a sign now to introduce that other bit of ground bait. So now they're there and we're catching well, a lot of people will ask, when do you know when to feed with ground bait again? And often it's when you've had a run of better ones, skimmers, bream, quality fish, and then all of a sudden you stop catching them, or you catch a different species like little roach or maybe a little perch, that's a sign that your bait's running out and you've got to feed again. Obviously there's no rules in terms of time frames and things like that. It's just down to you to sort of make that judgment and them decisions while you're fishing. Even things like that then, missed a bite, maybe you get a run where you miss 3 or 4 bites because they're unsettled and you just need to plop another nugget of that ground bait in to get them there. Or just refocus them. They'll still be in the area. That's the beauty of that loose ground bait at the start and that big platform of food to catch them on. They're never too far away, but sometimes you just need to refocus them with that little nugget of ground bait again. Like I've waited a little bit, I missed a bite and I'm waiting a little bit longer this time. Both signs that I might want to refeed. In fact, whatever happens, I'm definitely going to next time. I think there's definitely something in that sweetness to the ground bait as well. For me, what it allows you to do is catch everything over the mix. If you just went for a real strong fish meal mix, no doubt you would catch some skimmers and bream on it, but I think to catch the other fish, the roach, the little hand-sized skimmers, perch, that sweet edge to a ground bait really, really helps. And obviously the F1's got the sweetener in it and a nice dark colour. The Expander Pure Ground has got the pellet content that we need to hold them better ones, and then that little bit of super sweet liquid just leaks out into the water as some extra attraction. As you can see, I had that brilliant run and now it's lulled, so we're going to refeed again in a minute. Like that lull there. Let's just try it now. Drop another nugget in, bet they're right back on it, and we'll get our last little run before we... I can tell that cameraman John's absolutely dying to catch a bream. He's a big carp angler and he loves catching nice smelly match fishing bream. Little nugget. Two red maggots. Go get them, boys. Roach grabbed that on the way down, but it just shows that ground bait again pulls fish. Don't want you though, mate. Don't want you. Oh, that's a big one. Literally, look at him. The longer the day goes on, the bigger and better the fishing has got, or the bigger the fish and the better the fishing. But hopefully, I've given you a nice insight into a line that really is a winning method on commercials when you're fishing for silvers in the winter. And there's quite a few different things you've got to think about to get it right. Anyone can just drop in on a short pole and catch a few fish, but to really make the most of it, you've got to find the right place to fish in the first place, that little balance between the hard bottom and soft bottom at the bottom of the slope. You've then got to feed it right initially and set that bed. Damp ground bait, the right ground bait mix that's a balance of sweetness with that all important expander in there. And then you've got to build it up. The loose feed to get some fishing competing. Maybe you'll catch some small fish to start with, like we did today with a roach and a few perch. But then building it up, and when them better fish start to settle or start to make an appearance, you can sneak a bit more of that magic ground bait in and just refocus them and enjoy a fantastic finish. So if you're out this winter and you want to do some commercial silverfish fishing, make sure you don't forget about the close line, because trust me, it's absolutely deadly.